Welcome to History of the Popes. Today, we turn our gaze to one of the earliest shepherds of the flock, a figure whose pontificate flickers like a candle in the dim catacombs of 3rd century Rome, Pope Urban I. His story, pieced together from scant fragments, Eusebius's Chronicles, a weathered inscription in the catacomb of Callistus, reminds us that the papacy's grandeur was forged not only in moments of crisis, but in these unassuming intervals of fragile peace. To grasp Urban's place in the unfolding drama of the early church, we must first step back into the tumult of Rome in the early 3rd century. The year is 222, and the eternal city pulses with the chaos of imperial transition. The Emperor Elagabalus, that notorious priest-king from the Syrian sun cults, has just met his end at the blades of the Praetorian Guard, assassinated in a plot that reeks of the Senate's disdain for his exotic excesses. In his place rises Alexander Severus, a young ruler of more measured temperament, whose mother, Julia Mamaea, is said to have consulted Christian advisors in her quest for wisdom. For the Christian community in Rome, this shift marks a rare respite. Persecution, that ever-present spectre under emperors like Trajan or Marcus Aurelius, recedes into the background. No lions roar in the Colosseum for the faithful, no edicts demand recantations. It is a time when the church can breathe, when house churches swell with converts drawn not by fear, but by the quiet allure of the gospel's promise. Into this interlude steps Urban, elected Bishop of Rome on October 14, 222, following the violent death of his predecessor, Calixtus I. We know precious little of Urban's origins. The Liber Pontificalis, that later medieval compendium of papal law, tells us only that he was a Roman by birth, son of one Pontianus, a name that evokes the humble stock from which the early popes often sprang. No grand lineage here, no senatorial robes or equestrian estates. Urban was likely a man of the people, perhaps a presbyter in one of those clandestine assemblies along the Appian Way, where the faithful gathered in torchlit rooms to break bread and recite the Psalms. Eusebius, the great historian of Caesarea, writing a century later, affords him just a sentence. After Calixtus, Urbanus received the episcopate, who held it 8 years. 8 years. A span that, in the precarious arithmetic of early papal tenures, feels almost luxurious. From 222 to 230, Urban tends his flock amid the marble forums and teeming insulae of Rome, a city of 1 million souls, where Jupiter's temples still dwarf the crosses hidden in Christian hearts. What did leadership mean for a pope in those days? Not the pomp of Lateran palaces or the thunder of encyclicals, for the papacy was then more a pastoral office than a princely throne. The Bishop of Rome, as primus inter pares, among the apostles' heirs, his authority woven from threads of tradition, charity, and communal counsel. Urban inherits a church still reeling from the schisms of the preceding decades. Calixtus had navigated the reefs of theological discord, particularly the rigorous faction led by Hippolytus, that fiery intellectual who styled himself a rival bishop and penned scathing tracts against what he saw as laxity in the Roman see. Hippolytus, with his followers clinging to a puritanical code that excluded the lapsed from communion, had even set up a schismatic altar, drawing away perhaps 1/3 of the Roman faithful. Urban, true to his predecessor's course, holds the line with steadfast forbearance. He does not anathematize or excommunicate with undue haste. Rather, he embodies the Church's emerging ethos of mercy, allowing time for reconciliation. It is under Urban, or perhaps in the shadow of his reign, that Hippolytus's bark begins to drift back toward the fold, a reconciliation that would come to full flower under his successor, Pontian, when both men face the gales of renewed persecution together. This era of relative calm under Alexander Severus was no mere accident of imperial whim. It was a window for the Church to root itself deeper in Roman soil. Converts trickled in, merchants from the ports, slaves from the villas, even a few curious patricians weary of Mithras's bloody initiations. Tradition recounts that Urban was a skilled converter, a phrase that conjures images of late-night vigils in the catacombs, where the bishop, with voice steady as the Tiber's flow, unfolded the mysteries of baptism and the Eucharist. One later hagiographer credits him with baptizing Valerian, the noble husband of the Virgin Martyr Cecilia, and his brother, Tibertius, a tale woven into the golden threads of the Golden Legend, where Urban's prayers topple pagan idols like dominoes, leading to the convert's heroic witness. But let us pause here, as historians must, to sift legend from the lean soil of fact. These stories, blooming in the 6th century amid the Church's need for inspiring saints, bear the marks of pious embellishment. Cecilia's acts, for instance, mingle Urban with a martyrdom that chronology strains to contain. He died in peace, not in chains. Yet even in their mythic hue, they reveal a deeper truth. Urban's pontificate symbolized the Church's quiet conquest of hearts, not through coercion, but through the gentle gravity of lived faith. Consider, too, the material life of the community under his care. The early 3rd century marks a pivot in Christian practice, from persecuted sect to budding institution. Donations from the faithful sustained the agape meals, the care for orphans and widows that echoed the Acts of the Apostles. A decree attributed to Urban, echoed in later canon law, directs that such gifts be channeled solely to ecclesiastical needs. The ransom of captives, the succor of the poor, the adornment of altars. No silver patens for 25 churches, as once fancifully claimed. That anachronism belongs to a more gilded age. Instead, Urban's wisdom lies in stewardship, ensuring that the Church's arms remain untainted by personal gain, a bulwark against the scandals that had plagued earlier factions. In this, we glimpse the embryonic outlines of ecclesiastical governance, not yet the codified corpus juris canonici, but the ad hoc rulings of a bishop attuned to his people's perils. And what of the wider Church? Urban's Rome was no isolated outpost. Letters and emissaries threaded the Mediterranean, binding the sea to Antioch, Alexandria, and the nascent seas of Gaul. Though no surviving missives bear his seal, we can infer from Eusebius that doctrinal harmony was his quiet labor. The Novatian schism lay in the future, the Arian tempests unborn. For now, the great heresies were those of Gnostic navel-gazing and Montanist ecstasies, fringes that Urban's predecessors had largely contained. His reign, then, was one of consolidation, shoring up the unity that Calixtus had defended against Hippolytus's elitism. It was a papacy of presence, of the bishop as father confessor to a family scattered across the city's 7 hills. As the sun sets on Urban's 8 years, we confront the enigmas of his end. The year 230 dawns under the same benevolent Severus, whose edict of toleration, legendary, perhaps apocryphal, is said to have enshrined a chapel to Christ in his private lararium. No records speak of Urban's death on May 23rd or October 19th, as some catalogues vary. Natural causes, surely, in a time when 40-odd years marked a full span. Yet hagiography, ever eager to crown its heroes, once inscribed him in the Martyrology, linking him to the Decian persecutions that would claim his successors. Modern archaeology dispels this. No relics of torment, only the simple slab in the catacomb of Callistus, where de Rossi's spade in the 19th century unearthed the inscription Urbanus amid the papal crypts. A rival claim from the Coematerium Praetextati persists, but consensus tilts toward Callistus, fitting, for there, in those labyrinthine tunnels etched with Greek prayers and chai rows, The early popes slumbered as equals in death. Urban's legacy, then, is the legacy of the unsung, a bridge between the fiery trials of Calixtus and the storms awaiting Pontian. He reminds us that the Church's history is not a linear ascent to Vatican splendor, but a meandering path through valleys of obscurity. In his day, the papacy was less about power than perseverance, the daily bread of the Eucharist shared in peril, the baptismal font as refuge from empire's gaze. 7 future Urbans would don the tiara, from the crusade-calling Urban II to the Baroque Urban VII, each echoing this founder's name. But our Urban I endures as archetype of the pastor in peace, whose quiet fidelity tills the soil from which greater harvests grow. And so, as we conclude this glimpse into the 3rd century's veiled corners, let us reflect. In our own fractious age, what might Urban teach us of steadfastness amid schism, of mercy's slow leaven? Join us next time as we unearth another chapter in this grand narrative.